So it's called the Human Life Protection Act, and for those for the bill, they say it's a matter of protecting human life. Those against say everyone deserves access to this form of health care. Conversations surrounding abortion rights are back in the spotlight after state legislators pre-filed the Human Life Protection Act ahead of next year's session.
This just says a baby is a human life and should be protected from being killed.
The pre-filed bill aims to prohibit all abortions in the state with the exception of medical emergencies. Now, this piece of legislation comes a little over a year since the state Supreme Court voted in favor of the fetal heartbeat law in 2023. Jordan Pace, a local lawmaker in support of this pre-filed bill, shared the differences between this one and the one that is already in place in the state.
Heartbeat bill, 6 weeks is like the cutoff time, which frankly is arbitrary. Our point is with this bill, those of us who are on it, and kind of from our perspective, that all human life is all innocent human life is worth protecting, and that doesn't start at an arbitrary 6 weeks. That starts from the time that they come to exist. So that's the idea here, is to protect all life and to protect mothers.
Now, for people on the other side of the argument, this pre-filed bill is not surprising.
Year after year, anti-abortion politicians have been pushing to eliminate abortion in the state of South Carolina.
But to see yet another attempt to ban abortions back in the state house is still disappointing.
The most important part that people should know about this bill is it's a total abortion ban with no exceptions. The only exception is for the life of the mother. So there is no exception for rape. There is no exception for incest. There is no exception for the health of the pregnant person. So truly, they are looking at a total abortion ban.
Leto adds that both sides of this controversial topic share the same value of wanting to support children, but emphasizes that this is not the way to accomplish the shared goal.
We should be working on the child care crisis. We should be ensuring every single family has access to paid family medical leave. We should be feeding children in schools. That's the work that we could all be doing together to support children.
Planned Parenthood South Atlantic says the only funding they get from the state is through Medicaid reimbursements, and emphasize that's what every other doctor or hospital in the state gets. I spoke with Planned Parenthood and they tell me understanding the funding is crucial in this discussion.
I think the most important thing is for people to understand the money. When they talk about taxpayers funding Planned Parenthood, that's not happening at all. What is happening is the Medicaid insurance plan reimburses Planned Parenthood after we have provided medical services to patients. And that includes men, women, teens. It does not cover abortion at Planned Parenthood. Never has, never will. That's the Medicaid law.
Ringer adds that yes, this affects Planned Parenthood, but it affects patients on Medicaid more in the event they would have to find another provider, which she says there is a shortage of Medicaid doctors in the state and even fewer that accept Medicaid patients.
The state Supreme Court will hear oral arguments both for and against the regulations outlined in current abortion legislation. Our Lauren Lennon joining us now with more on a lawsuit filed against the current ban and just how organizations think this might all play out in court. Lauren?
Well, Mel, this lawsuit ultimately calls for abortion care in the state to be extended through 9 weeks of pregnancy rather than the 6 weeks that is currently outlined. Excerpts of the lawsuit read that South Carolina's Senate Bill 474, quote, bans abortion once a so-called fetal heartbeat can be detected and defines fetal heartbeat as cardiac activity or the steady and repetitive rhythmic contraction of the fetal heart within the gestational sac. However, plaintiffs of the lawsuit claim at 6 weeks since a patient's last menstrual period, there is no detectable sound that can be heard by a medical provider or pregnant patient. Organizations on the other side of the aisle say the opposite, in that at 6 weeks gestation, a heartbeat can be detected in the womb and the heart beats up to 110 beats per minute. And ahead of tomorrow's hearing, they're confident in the outcome.
I'm confident in the oral arguments that are being prepared from the Attorney General's office. And, I know that the science is going to prevail in this case. The humanity of the unborn child will prevail in this case. The South Carolina Supreme Court has upheld this law before. And so we look forward to those 5,000 lives annually continuing to be saved for the will of the people.
What we've gone through is not okay. It will never be okay. And we will not stop pushing for justice until our reproductive rights are restored and protected.
Taylor Shelton is suing the state after having to go to North Carolina to get an abortion after learning she was pregnant during a doctor's visit. Shelton taking her fight to the state's highest court Wednesday morning alongside Planned Parenthood as both look for a 9-week abortion ban in South Carolina.
It's frustrating. Yeah, just like it was last year when we were in the other court. It's hard to hear them argue back and forth about, at what time should we allow abortion to be, and I feel like it really doesn't matter. I think that it's up to the person who's potentially having a pregnancy.
But now that your position is different, wouldn't it be true that 8-week data, that 6-week data is right on point, down the heart of what I was pressing on from day one in this case?
Supreme Court Justice John C. Few is talking about the state's current 6-week abortion ban. The 2023 law says abortions cannot be performed after an ultrasound can detect cardiac activity or the steady and repetitive rhythmic contraction of the fetal heart within the gestational sac. Experts say that can happen as early as 6 weeks of pregnancy. Planned Parenthood argues the "or" in the law changes everything.
And so the intent was to ban abortion after the detection of a fetal heartbeat, not to ban abortion at a specific point in time. And the legislature specifically gave some opportunity for more limited number of abortions to occur. But when the legislature wants to talk about a specific gestational age, it knows how to do so. But you will not see the term 6 weeks anywhere in the text of the fetal heartbeat ban.
The state argues the time period to detect a fetal heartbeat is clear, and the South Carolina law does not state that the fetal heart must be fully developed in order to be enforced.
The circuit court said it was clear beyond a shadow of a doubt that point was approximately 6 weeks, and the circuit court was correct. The text confirms this conclusion. Fetal does not draw the bright line at 10 weeks that my friends suggest. A heart exists from at least 5 weeks in pregnancy, and there is evidence to support the General Assembly's conclusion.
What is the difference between 6 weeks and 9 weeks on that prediction rate? Is there any evidence about that?
This proposed bill was pre-filed back in December and introduced in the House on January 14th. It defines an unborn child as a person at any stage of development to ensure that an unborn child who is a victim of homicide is afforded equal protection under the homicide laws of the state, with exceptions. The Prenatal Equal Protection Act is now in the House Judiciary Committee. Upstate Representative Mike Burns says its purpose is to follow the 14th Amendment, which is every citizen's right to life, liberty, and property.
The purpose of the bill, I signed on to it when I learned that it was a bill to recognize life begins at conception.
The exceptions in the bill include a spontaneous miscarriage, life-saving procedures to save the life of the mother, and a mistake or unintentional error made by a physician. I asked Representative Burns if women could be prosecuted under this bill.
That wasn't my goal to do that. I was a little bit surprised that it was a possibility to do what it's able to do, apparently. And that's why I told you at the onset there'd be a time for that to be talked about and debated later on.
Right now, South Carolina has a ban on abortions after 6 weeks of pregnancy, but it still faces legal challenges. The Prenatal Protection Act would mean equal protection laws are applied the moment of fertilization, which would mean abortion at any stage would be illegal and could lead to a homicide charge.
Yes, because it would be viewed that life begins at conception 6 weeks earlier than the heartbeat.
Choose. Let women choose. Let women choose.
This was the scene early Tuesday just outside the Black Government Building on the State House grounds in Columbia. Hundreds standing in line for hours to get a chance to testify in front of a panel of House lawmakers considering a near total ban on abortion in the state.
I'm here specifically because I'm appalled at this bill.
Extreme abortion ban that would put women at risk. The exceptions so narrow for protecting women, and the penalties for doctors are so high that women will die.
Life in a mother's womb is beautiful, and it is never
a choice. The center of Tuesday's hearing is the Human Rights Protection Act. The proposal would ban all abortions with exceptions only for a small number of medical conditions. There would be no exceptions for rape, incest, or fetal anomalies.
I'm not going to support any bill that effectively endorses both rape and incest.
Science, medicine, natural law, and moral law all disaffirm the necessity and rightness of abortion because it violates the integrity of the mother's, father's, and child's bodies and souls.
People on both sides of the issue made their voices heard for more than 3 hours during Tuesday's hearing.
But I can think of no other cause more important than saving lives.
Just hearing their stories, they're heartbreaking. None of us should have to reveal the most private moments of our lives in order to get legislators to listen to us. But here we are again.
While outside the hearing, protests continue to ring out all across the State House grounds.
I think if they were really doing the business of their constituents, they would put it on the ballot. I think if they were really doing the business of their constituents, they would put it on the ballot.
The panel did not take a vote on the proposal on Tuesday and only took testimony. It is not clear if there will be another hearing.
All the Republicans, I know I did, we ran on being pro-life from conception. That's what's in the platform.
The Human Life Protection Act would ban and criminalize all abortions in the Palmetto State. It makes exceptions in cases to, quote, prevent the death of a pregnant woman, but carries none for rape or incest.
We should not punish innocent lives for how they were conceived.
Casey Freeman, a Charleston County mother, says forcing women to have unwanted pregnancies can harm the future child and their quality of life.
Subject those born from this ban to potential childhood neglect and abuse as they are born into families who cannot afford them or perhaps simply did not want to become parents.
The proposed bill also imposes felony charges for physicians who perform an abortion outside the exception of medical emergencies. A registered nurse from the Midlands argues these penalties won't achieve the GOP's goal of protecting life.
Criminalizing abortion does not stop it. It only drives it underground, putting individuals at greater risk of harm.
State Representative Jordan Pace calls the 6-week abortion ban, which is currently being litigated by the state Supreme Court, a step in the right direction. But he strongly believes there's a need for this heightened measure and says he's not concerned should it be challenged.
I don't see that as a hindrance or a roadblock that the system is working, because that's how it's supposed to work.
Still, opponents hold strong that this bill will do more harm than good.
It treats women not as human beings with dignity, but as criminals for making choices that are often heartbreaking and deeply personal.
When we got word that the pregnancy was no longer viable, it was devastating.
South Carolina's 6-week fetal heartbeat bill passed in May 2023. That same week, Kelly Sharkey learned her pregnancy had severe health complications. But the procedure she had scheduled was now at risk.
Hearing her say that the hospital's lawyers were not allowing her to continue doing this procedure, it was just confusing. It was surreal.
Sharkey was forced to fly out of state alone to have the surgery in Maryland. She says sitting on that plane was one of the darkest times in her life.
I was carrying my baby who was dying, and being alone was really hard. And it took me a while to even be okay with even getting on an airplane again.
Under a near-total abortion ban, Dr. Natalie Gregory believes cases like Sharkey's will become more common. The bill only outlines exceptions for medical emergencies, but she says it provides no definition of what qualifies as one.
Sometimes we don't have time to wait an hour to ask somebody, much less a couple of days for attorneys to hash it out.
Dr. Gregory says delaying care for a legal opinion or forcing a patient to carry to term can bring more complications for the woman and fetus. According to the State Department of Public Health, South Carolina ranks 8th highest for maternal mortality in the U.S. Dr. Gregory argues this could worsen under tighter restrictions.
I've personally had patients that have sat in the hospital for days on end waiting for a meeting to happen behind closed doors to figure out if they're going to be given the medical options that they have to take care of their complicated pregnancy.
I'm Matt Gelka in Washington, where the Supreme Court dealt a huge blow to Planned Parenthood when it comes to getting Medicaid funds. A 6-3 ruling from the Supreme Court on where Medicaid patients get their care could open the door to defund Planned Parenthood. The 6 conservative justices blocked Planned Parenthood from suing South Carolina after the state pulled the provider's Medicaid funding in 2018. The 3 liberal justices dissented.
You should have the freedom to decide what's best for you, not the government. This is a fight that Planned Parenthood has never backed down from.
South Carolina's Governor Henry McMaster celebrated the decision, writing in part, 7 years ago, we took a stand to protect the sanctity of life and defend South Carolina's authority and values. And today, we are finally victorious.
This is a great win, not just for South Carolina, but for all of us as pro-life taxpayers who have a definitive decision from the United States Supreme Court that we are not forced to fund the abortion industry with our tax dollars.
This chapter of the abortion rights fight centered around whether or not Medicaid patients could pick their own providers. Medicaid already can't provide funding for abortions, but South Carolina's decision to cut off all Medicaid money to Planned Parenthood and the court's decision to block lawsuits over the policy means other states could soon follow suit. Planned Parenthood says around half of their patients use Medicaid. Conservatives have long tried to defund Planned Parenthood, saying that even though federal money can't go towards abortion services, any taxpayer money supporting the organization still helps them provide the procedure. The House version of the Big Beautiful Bill in Congress has a provision that bars Medicaid funding for Planned Parenthood nationwide.
In states where abortion is legal, that would in essence be a backdoor way of banning abortion.
3 other states, Texas, Arkansas, and Missouri, have already cut Planned Parenthood off from Medicaid. Other states could follow if the provision in the congressional bill doesn't end up making the final version.
It's been just over 2 years since South Carolina's 6-week abortion ban went into effect. And the Department of Public Health says the procedure is being reported far less in the state. Our Claire Weber spoke with people on both sides of debate about the report's findings. Claire?
Well, Tessa, the Fetal Heartbeat Act was signed into law in May of 2023. DPH is tracking how that may have impacted the number of reported abortions here in the Palmetto State.
Abortions in South Carolina on the decline. The state saw a 63% drop in procedures from 2023 to 2024, according to DPH.
If we're talking in football terms, I think it's a touchdown, but the game's not over.
More than 8,000 abortions were reported in 2023. In 2024, that number dropped to just over 3,000 abortions statewide. But pro-choice advocates argue that doesn't paint the full picture.
To suggest that we've stopped abortion in any way is wrong. We have just simply changed where it happens.
Vicki Ringer, who oversees Planned Parenthood Charleston and Columbia, says half of the out-of-state abortion patients in North Carolina are South Carolina residents. The DPH report also finding that neither of the state's Planned Parenthood clinics are the leading provider for abortions.
Planned Parenthood has always been the convenient scapegoat for a lot of the conversations in Congress and our state legislature.
Instead, DPH says Greenville Women's Clinic, a private operation, performs the most abortions.
The population density in the upstate is higher than it is here, and generally a younger demographic too. So that didn't surprise me a whole lot.
Still, Representative Pace is continuing to push efforts to defund Planned Parenthood and pass stricter abortion restrictions.
Voters in South Carolina have shown overwhelmingly over and over again that they are a pro-life majority.
I think our legislators have done exactly what they wanted to, which is to make sure women in South Carolina have to suffer as much as possible before being able to access an abortion.
The restrictions that we already have in South Carolina are already causing so much pain for mothers and families and people who want to start families in this state. And this is just going to exacerbate that.
A new total abortion ban is working through the state Senate outside of the regular session. It's likely lawmakers will make it a top priority in January. Senate Bill 323 in subcommittee is scheduled for a hearing on October 1st. It'll be the only time the public can submit testimony. Jesse Klinger is learning the changes the bill would bring to state law and why advocacy groups are sounding the alarm. Jesse?
Bill 323, also called the Unborn Child Protection Act, would repeal safeguards under the state's current 6-week abortion ban, change legal definitions, and could create implications for contraception and in vitro fertilization. I reached out to the bill's sponsors, Senators Cash, Rice, and Garrett, but did not hear back. However, a local mother and advocates tell me they worry about the future legal landscape this bill could create.
There's just nothing worse than feeling disregarded and disrespected in a state that you've chosen to call home, and chosen to start a family and raise a family in.
Charleston mother Tori Nardone has already faced emotional turmoil and the legal complications of the state's current abortion law.
I had to leave the state of South Carolina to get an abortion because we learned that as I entered my second trimester of my second pregnancy that our daughter had a fatal fetal anomaly. They were shocked I hadn't miscarried yet.
But Senate Bill 323 redefines life as beginning at conception, equating abortion with homicide, and removes exceptions for rape, incest, and fatal fetal anomalies. The bill also makes it a felony for anyone to share any information regarding how to obtain an abortion and possibly criminalize leaving the state to receive one.
So not only could I not get the help I needed, I wouldn't be able to leave the state to get the help I needed. And anyone who helped me, my husband who drove me, my mother-in-law who watched my son, who watched our son, would be a criminal under this law.
The new language could also criminalize a mother who experiences a miscarriage or stillbirth.
It's not actually new legal theory to criminalize pregnancy outcomes here in our state of South Carolina, but it would increase it.
Last year, a 22-year-old Orangeburg woman was arrested and charged with homicide by child abuse after suffering a miscarriage. The charges were dropped after a grand jury declined to indict her. Under the new abortion law, Ashley Leto worries cases like this will become more common. Advocates are also raising concerns about implications for contraception and in vitro fertilization.
This bill changes the definition of a legal contraceptive. So we are not certain how this bill will have full effects on birth control.
It breaks my heart for, other aspiring moms and other moms who want to grow their families who are simply just terrified to do so in this state.
Leto says the Medical Affairs Subcommittee hearing is the only time the public can share testimony on the bill. That hearing is scheduled for October 1st at 9:30 a.m. at the Grisette Building in Columbia.
If embryos are legally considered people, doctors may not be able to create or test or freeze or discard embryos as part of the standard IVF process, and that affects our patients.
An advocacy group estimates more than 300 people have signed up for public testimony as people raise concerns about the impact the bill could have on miscarriage care, contraception, and fertility treatment. Jesse Klinger spoke with a fertility nonprofit and local mother about their concerns with this bill. Jesse?
Senate Bill 323 looks to change legal definitions, which could create new implications for contraception, fertility treatments, and maternity care, specifically defining a human embryo as, quote, a human being that begins as a fertilized egg or zygote. One Charleston mother tells me about her concerns with the bill as someone who's undergone fertility treatment herself.
I had no problem getting pregnant. It was getting pregnant with a healthy embryo and then also staying pregnant. That was my issue.
Alexis Johns gave birth to her daughter after undergoing fertility treatment.
So prior to having her, I had a handful of miscarriages, but then I was able to get pregnant with her through IUI, obviously delivered her safely.
Now she's pregnant with a son thanks to in vitro fertilization, or IVF, with plans to write and send her testimony to the committee.
It's just so scary to think about how little this state that we call home cares about its mother. If you want to have an opinion on this, you need to understand the impact that it can have on women and the women in your life, because 1 in 4 women have miscarriages, and so many of them need care.
The Jewish Fertility Foundation is a nonprofit that works to provide education and support for families struggling to get pregnant. Founder and CEO Alana Frank says clients have been reaching out with concerns over the bill.
So when a human embryo is defined as a human being from the moment of fertilization, It sounds really technical, but it does have a real impact on how IVF is practiced.
While the bill focuses on abortion, Frank warns of its larger implications.
Is that it's often framed around abortion, but then it can also have a ripple effect when it comes to IVF and limit the fertility treatment. So that's why patients, doctors, groups that help people on their path to parenthood are worried. I think people don't always understand that families who are needing IVF or assisted reproductive technology are already facing higher costs and stress when they're trying to conceive this way. And the legal uncertainty makes it so much harder.
But some Republican lawmakers consider current IVF practices to be unethical.
There are dozens of IVF practitioners that do IVF in an ethical and moral way, where they don't, where it doesn't lead to the mass death of at this point in the country, hundreds of thousands of babies in their embryonic states.
State Representative Jordan Pace says he supports the bill as it's written.
The main point of the bill is to protect human dignity and human life, and that's always been the point of all this pro-life legislation in general. And that's what I'd like to see is all innocent life protected.
The Medical Affairs Subcommittee hearing on Wednesday morning is the only time the public can share testimony on the bill. It begins at 9:30 a.m. in Columbia and will be live streamed online.